Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining the Blue Agility Agile Empowered webinar series. We are going to go ahead and get started. This webinar, Empower the Portfolio with bluejazz, will take a deep dive into SAFe at the portfolio level and how bluejazz can support your SAFe and Agile implementation. This is the final webinar to the four-part webinar series. My name is Ashley Bailey, Director of Marketing and Communications here at Blue Agility. And here with me today are your presenters, Ali and Bobby Walters. They will take you through key concepts, ceremonies, and artifacts at the SAFe level, at the portfolio level in SAFe, and how bluejazz can support your implementation through that within an enterprise adoption. Before we get started, there's just a few things I'd like to go over. To avoid background noise, we do have everyone on mute. But that doesn't mean that we don't want to hear from you or have any type of engagement. So if you have any questions, please type them in the question spot on your GoToWebinar, and we will answer your questions throughout the webinar. Also, we do have a poll question that we will launch at the beginning of the presentation. So please answer that poll so that we have an accurate representation of the audience. Additionally, this webinar is being recorded, so the link to the recording as well as the slides for the presentation will be made available to you within 24 hours. And I think with that is everything that I wanted to go over. So I'm going to now hand it off to Ali, your first presenter. Go ahead, Ali. Ali, if you're talking, we cannot hear you. Sorry, folks, it'll be just 1 minute while we figure this out. Bear with us 1 second. I think there's an audio code that he needs to enter, so it'll just be 1 second here.
Okay, Ashley, can you hear me now?
Ali, we can hear you.
Okay, finally. Sorry about that, folks. Okay, can you see my screen,
Yes, you're all good. Thanks,
Ashley?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Sorry about the delay, folks. You do your best to prepare, and that's technology for you. Okay, we have a rather simple agenda here, folks. We will discuss the main basic fundamentals of SAFe Portfolio. Then I'll show you some of the most important lessons learned from how we at Blue Agility helped our clients succeed with SAFe Portfolio. Then my colleague Bobby will show you some of the capabilities of our bluejazz product that significantly enhance your capability to succeed with SAFe Portfolio. So let's start by looking at how the top layer of SAFe makes program portfolio management lean and agile. And before we delve into that, Ashley, if you could please start the poll. I just want to have a quick idea, folks, of what are some of the basic problems you face with managing your portfolio. Okay, folks, that gives me a very good idea of some of the problems. Believe it or not, these are definitely problems that I intended to talk about today. So let's talk about some of the basics of SAFe to begin with. Now, you've all heard, you've all seen probably this uh, big picture of SAFe, maybe from the last previous sessions of this webinar with its 3 layers here, or from their website, the scaledagileFramework.com. Our focus today is on the top layer, which is SAFe Portfolio. SAFe Portfolio provides centralized strategy with decentralized execution. Now, what that means is that decisions that need economy of scale, have long-term impact, are difficult to change over time, those are made centrally by the program portfolio management, whereas execution is left to the release trains in the middle layer of SAFe. Those release trains are closest to the implementation of those decisions and therefore can handle the execution and adjust accordingly much more efficiently. SAFe Portfolio provides and promotes actually lean budgeting. And lean budgeting, program portfolio management remains in control of the purse strings, that is to say the overall spending amounts, while the release trains in the SAFe middle program layer, those trains leverage team longevity. When you have a team longevity, what happens is you get to achieve top performing teams to stay together longer, thereby achieving optimal productivity. They can also leverage pooling of resources for such enhanced productivity. Also in the SAFe top layer, which is the portfolio layer, portfolio, you can see here, SAFe Portfolio applies the Kanban approach to the major functionality that is captured in epics. This kind of approach maintains direct visibility to how epics originate from the strategic themes of the organization. Furthermore, the Kanban approach limits the work in progress, that is to say, it uses what is known as WIP limits, WIP, work in progress limits, to regulate how the epics flow to lower layers of SAFe. Now, we will see later, folks, how this helps solve some of the most common problems of IT organizations. In fact, we will see how it solves some of the problems that you folks indicated in the poll we just asked you to fill in. The epics generated by SAFe Portfolio, those are both business and architectural epics. In other words, architectural epics are first-class citizens in SAFe. And even though our focus today is on SAFe Portfolio, let's quickly review the other two layers of SAFe. The middle layer here, that is to say the program layer, it has release trains. Each train is a group of a few synchronized Scrum teams, and trains proceed in program increments, that is to say PIs, if you've heard that acronym. Each of those PIs is a series of about 4 sprints. And finally, the bottom layer, which is the team layer of SAFe, it is basically the one that has the regular activities of an individual Agile team. And if you know Scrum, just regular out-of-the-box Scrum, then you know 90% of what this layer does. Let's talk now about how the fundamentals of SAFe Portfolio in particular, effectively connect the portfolio of the organization to its business direction. Here we see that the business strategic themes in SAFe directly drive value streams. Now, folks, the notion of value streams, you probably have heard that before, but that notion is taken from lean manufacturing, which minimizes wasteful waiting time between production stages, and then each value stream is implemented by one or more Agile release trains. Strategic themes also directly drive the funnel of the epic Kanban progression, and when that happens, it ensures that the resulting epics continue to relate directly to the business goals of the organization. So you maintain that continuous link to the major business objectives of the organization. And as a result of driving what trains implement, and as a result of all of this, what we have, folks, is that we are driving what trains implement and what epics are generated. So business investment, as a result, effectively governs the vision and roadmap of the SAFe program middle layer. Another aspect of SAFe connecting the portfolio to the business is that each value stream ends up being implemented by one or more Agile release trains, and those Agile release trains are budgeted accordingly by the program portfolio management. The artifact that carries the business decisions from the top SAFe portfolio layer down to the lower layers of SAFe is the epic. Now, folks, as the notion of epic in SAFe is very similar to the notion of epic in the regular Scrum approach. That is to say, epics are large pieces of functionality equivalent to traditional projects. So whereas the large pieces of functionality in the large pieces of functionality in traditional projects are what carries the main thrust of development, that main thrust is carried by epics in the SAFe approach. Business epics present customer-facing value, whereas architectural epics enable the solutions that deliver that value. Let's look in detail.
Ali,
yes?
We did have a question come through during that one.
By all means.
Projects often get prioritized according to whoever has the most clout and screams the loudest in the organization.
Right.
So true. So how do you convince them to switch to a more objective way of prioritizing, in this case, prioritizing epics?
Okay, well, I would actually, I mean, we're going to get into more detail of that later, but let me give you a very brief idea before we go on. I would do two things, among other things, actually, but a couple of main things I would do is that I would encourage every epic stakeholder, and as I mentioned earlier, we're really prioritizing epics here rather than traditional projects, but I would encourage every epic stakeholder to attend epic prioritization sessions. And during those sessions, I would ask them to make a clear and concise case for what their epic or epics, or I should say, of why their epic or epics need to be given high priority. By using the priority mechanisms that I'm going to delve into a little bit later, you try to objectify the prioritization process as much as possible, and therefore you try to avoid the politics that go into and the clout that goes into which epics get the high priority. And second of all, I would look for sponsorship of this approach, somebody who is a top leader of the organization, because trying to change an organization culture from haphazard, clout influencing which epics get the highest priority to something that is more objectively conducted, that is a change in the organization culture. And as with every effort to change organizational culture, you need a champion with sufficient clout. There is that dirty word again. But I would use the clout of that champion and hopefully his or her willingness to knock heads together, so to speak, to make them work together so they would reach consensus as to which epics have the highest priority. So again, objectively conducted epic prioritization session and sponsorship from an organizational champion to hopefully persuade everyone to follow that approach. Okay?
Great. Thanks, Ali.
Okay. Thank you for the question, by the way. That was great. Okay. So let's look in some more detail here, folks, as to how SAFe, the portfolio, applies Kanban to manage the flow of epics. And because, as I alluded to earlier, because strategic themes directly drive the funnel of Portfolio Kanban makes the largest business initiatives visible. It is visible all the time as we deal with epics. Furthermore, that approach brings structure and analysis to the decision making of how to analyze Kanbans, how to analyze epics, how to implement them, how to prioritize them. Thereby, you're promoting that objectively instead of the whims of politics, as I alluded to earlier when I answered that question that was asked earlier. Also, Kanban provides WIP limit, that is to say work in progress limits, and those limits serve to ensure the teams analyze responsibly, thereby prevent unrealistic expectations. One of the most prominent factors in the poll we just conducted talked about that there is always way more projects for IT resources to conduct than IT has the capacity to serve those projects effectively. So we will see later how this helped our clients solve that problem very effectively. SAFe also applies metrics right from the portfolio layer. So we are used to metrics being close to the nuts and bolts of developing software. Here, SAFe starts with very effective metrics at the very top layer of the framework. So here you can see an example of those metrics, namely the epics progress report. Each epic is tracked across PIs and across release trains to report its completion status, showing the points that it took to complete it, and the points remaining to complete the epic, if any. And what those metrics enable us to do is to actually come up with forecasts. Forecasts in this particular example shown here for the completion of remaining epics. So, for example, by comparing finished epics to remaining epics, we can get size estimates of the remaining epics. And then once we get those size estimates, what we can do is take those size estimates and divide them by the train velocities. You know, if we keep track of how the train velocities to see how the teams in each train are able to finish functionality and demo them at the end of each sprint, each PI, we can take the size estimates of remaining epics, divide them by the train velocity, and come up with a high confidence estimate of how long it will take to complete the remaining epics. And finally, folks, for the basics of SAFe Portfolio, let's look at a couple of the main roles in SAFe Portfolio. Here you see the PPM, which stands for Program Portfolio Management, which can be composed of any number of business leaders whose titles, as shown on in this picture here, the titles can vary from organization to organization. That is to say, the titles of the members that go into forming the PPM. And the PPM is, its main responsibility is to control total spending on developing epics. Also, the skills of the PPM members should include market knowledge, technology awareness, in other words, skills that allow them to effectively keep close tabs on the progress of those prioritized epics. Another major role is what we call the epic owner. The epic owner is the chaperone, if you will, of the epic as it goes through the portfolio Kanban, also as it gets implemented in release trains. The epic owner is expected to answer questions from the development teams that are implementing the epic, and also, folks, if you remember from your basic Scrum, as each functionality is finished, as the epic is finished, as its features are all implemented, it's the epic's owner's responsibility to attempt the demo for that functionality for the epic and accept the epic as complete when it meets its conditions of satisfaction. Okay, folks, so we looked at some of the most important fundamentals of SAFe Portfolio, such as strategic themes driving epics, which in turn drive the agile release trains, the Kanban progression of epics. We looked at metrics and forecasting, and some of the main roles of SAFe Portfolio. Now let's look at some of the best practices, that is to say, some of the lessons learned that we empirically gleaned from helping our clients apply SAFe Portfolio. So these folks are the result of real experiences that we at Blue Agility have had with our clients. So, folks, what we've seen is that in order for an organization to get the full benefit of the scaled agile framework, they really need to apply lean budgeting. Because what we have often observed is that an organization can start with an agile initiative or one or two agile initiatives. They could achieve some progress, in fact, sometimes very significant progress. But then they hit the budget brick wall because traditional budgeting, is marred with a lot of overhead, a lot of complexity. So we need to reduce the overhead of traditional budgeting. If you look at the left graphic of the slide, it indicates that traditional budgeting of each traditional project is actually a set of budgets, because it would include a budget from database administrators, testers, developers, all sorts of different sub-organizations, departments, groups, if you will, and it ends up being too detailed and too rigid to be able to deliver real value, to be able to be flexible enough to deliver real value. Because, folks, you don't need me to tell you that to begin with, software by nature is very estimate. And, add to that the complexity and overhead of traditional budgets, and it really leads to finger pointing and low morale. What we need to do, folks, is what Instead of that, all of that complexity, portfolio management follows lean budgeting that allows program portfolio management to retain total spending control while empowering programs decision making. This is represented, folks, by the right graphic. Over there, that graphic shows lean budgeting as promoted by SAFe Portfolio. Release trains allow for team members to stay together. They lead to much more effective productivity, thereby reducing budget costs. And in that situation, PPM can check the status of epic completion for each train, sometimes every PI, sometimes every other PI, and adjust the budgets accordingly. And, SAFe really provides some excellent guidance as to how to adjust the budget and follow lean budgeting. One of the main tenets of lean budgeting is that you should ignore sunken costs. That is to say, it's never mind how much you spent on an epic. If it turns out that it doesn't need a program needs or what have you, then by all means, change the priorities and start spending your money where it matters. Another thing we found, folks, is that as epics go through and emerge from their Kanban progression, we found that there is more than one option to prioritize them. So, for example, there is the WSJF approach recommended by SAFe. That approach, actually, that acronym stands for Weighted Shortest Job First. It is a simple formula that takes into account customer valuation of the epic and how long or how costly it is to implement that epic. There is, you can follow that formula, which, as I said, it's quite simple to understand and follow. However, other alternatives are what we call as dot voting. And dot voting, each business stakeholder is given a number of dots to assign to the epics he or she thinks is most important. And then the epics that get the most votes will have the highest priority. This is similar to what we call the Likert scale, yet another option for you to prioritize epics. And that approach, each business stakeholder evaluates each epic on a scale of 1 to 10. And then you add up the numbers, and the epics with the highest numbers end up with the highest priority. And then there's the method depicted on the slide that you see in front of you here, folks, where we let the needs of the market decide which epics are to be implemented first. So, for example, here, what I'm calling customer milestones on this slide, they drive which epics are to be completed first, which functionalities need to go into delivering into delivering to the market at each customer milestone. And now we come to how to solve one of the most prevalent problems that plague IT resources, how to avoid overwhelming those IT resources. SAFe Portfolio has proven very effective in solving that problem because, organizations tend to have much more demand on IT resources than the IT capacity can do justice to those demands. You would see, in other words, folks, what I'm saying is that there are usually many more projects imposed on those resources than they can effectively deliver. So what happens is that this leads to task switching, which really kills productivity. I mean, you would see traditional project managers continually looking over the shoulders of developers and telling them, drop this task, work on this task instead. Sometimes, more than once a day they would do that. And, that's just to keep all stakeholders happy by telling them, hey, we're working on your project. And often, unfortunately, those overwhelmed IT resources end up missing delivery dates and delivering subpar software that does not, live up to the quality that it's meant to. And instead, SAFe Portfolio regulates the flow of epics with Kanban. That's folks what I was referring to earlier. Because Kanban has WIP limits, it regulates the flow of epics, and also SAFe Portfolio prioritizes those epics so that, with that prioritization, with those WIP limits, what you end up doing, epics are fed to the lower layers of the SAFe framework in a way that matches the capacity of the IT resources, thereby protecting those resources from being overwhelmed by business demand. So next, let's talk about how to avoid too much spurious detail too early in the development. Now, we have seen that traditional portfolio management uses, detailed documents up front, like project charters and myriad other detailed documents, to justify, to marshal all sorts of justifications as to why a project needs to be done and how to get that project started. Now, folks, when you're just considering the start of a project, you're in no position to render information about the project in copious detail, because after all, you're just starting. And if you, force those incredibly copious details up front, you will be compiling a lot of detail with false precision. And I call this false precision because that kind of detail is virtually impossible to obtain accurately when you're very early in a project. Instead, SAFe uses a lightweight business case for each epic to concisely state the description of the epic, the value that is to be delivered by the epic, and even if that light business case captures the epic's return on investment, it captures that ROI in a way that is very brief, very concise. It avoids complex formulas, which, as I said, are based, as I said before, are based on false precision. We've all seen, traditional project management tools that have very complex formulas for ROI calculations that are based on details, as I said, that are virtually impossible to obtain or even guess accurately up front in the project. Okay, folks, finally, what I'd like to show you is that you can start SAFe with or without your portfolio layer. So we have customers where we started them with the portfolio layer, and then, went down and initiated, we helped them to initiate a program layer, and then the team layer. Or we can do it the other way, bottom up. We have customers where we help stand up a few Scrum teams, then release trains, and then institute a portfolio practice. We even, believe it or not, we had a client that wanted to start with a few Scrum teams and a portfolio program, and then the middle layer came in later on. So we are experienced with all sorts of flexibility to help the organization adopt the SAFe Agile framework. Okay, folks, let me pause for a second here. Any questions before my colleague Bobby starts showing you the bluejazz product? Okay.
I didn't see any more come through, Ollie.
Okay, Bobby, please take it over, my friend.
Okay. Is my screen showing up okay?
Yes, Bobby, we can see it.
Okay, great. All right, so thank you, Ali. As was previously mentioned, we are talking about the portfolio layer today, and today we're going to show off a little bit of our product called bluejazz. And the parts that we're going to be covering are the RTC SAFe add-on and its capabilities within the portfolio layer, as well as we'll quickly touch on some of the other aspects, like feature completeness, just to give a little sense of how all this works together. But the high-level concepts here, we're first introduced to the dashboard, which might be visible for CIOs or the C-level executives, to get a quick sense of what's going on with my portfolio. So you can see here on this particular dashboard, we're presented with what's called the Epic Capacity Allocation information. And just like Ali mentioned, architecture is a first-class citizen within SAFe, but we also need to keep tabs on how much work we're designing, designating for architectural value versus how much is going to be aligned with the business. And we point this out just to keep tabs on, when projects are first starting out, you're probably going to have more architectural work to lay out the foundation. And as progress moves forward, you should be able to deliver more business value. So this pie chart would, the ratios would shift around depending on, the initial phase of, the enterprise or the agile release train. So with this widget, we can quickly, tell that, there's a certain percentage for architecture. And within Rational Team Concert, using our SAFe add-on, we can click on this pie widget, and we can see that, okay, these are the 4 specific epics that have architectural value, aligned here. So that's just one way to get some of the details out of it. And if I go back to the dashboard, we can see that there's a Portfolio Kanban tab available here. And this is probably like the more preferred way to look at the data, just because it aligns with the SAFe practice of using the 2 Kanbans for your business epics and your architectural epics. And within this screen, you can quickly tell the WIP limits that have been established for each column. These can be set, per enterprise, and these are, the rules and things that kind of grow out of your progress through the agile release train and the statusing. And some of this will depend on how often you do your budgeting activities. So the length of your epics may determine how much you can actually set aside per WIP limit. So through here, you can quickly see, or you've probably noticed that there's a color designation for a lot of these. And this comes from the SAFe Big Picture, and that most of your architecturally natured things, so epics that have general architectural value, features that have architectural value, and so on, they're usually noted in a red coloring. So within the SAFe add-on, we have that same color designation as well. So anything that has the prime focus around architecture will show up in red, whereas things that are more business aligned will show up in the blue color you see here. And going into more of the details, like Ali was talking about, how do you get the information about how well is the epic progressing, the lightweight business case, and that type of information. From the Kanban views, we can actually hover over a particular epic and get that information in a summary fashion. But by clicking into it, we can get more of the details. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on this epic. And we'll just cover quickly some of the fields that are of interest to this presentation. So here you can see that the epic does have a particular type, business or architecture in this case. And again, the priority and the ranking, there's multiple ways to go about that. But the interesting point here is the progress information. And some organizations are hesitant to expose their epics or their long-term vision towards their team members, but with the epic information and knowing why people are making certain efforts, so why are people developing this code, it goes back to the point that morale can be improved by knowing why something is being done, and they can usually do it a little bit better. So if they have an understanding of what this epic means through the business case information, the teams will work on their stories, and their features and their points will all accumulate and roll up into this epic here. So I bring all of that up is that all the team's information that's put into the tool is still being leveraged. So they get a sense of, okay, this epic means, this to the organization. It has a certain priority. We're not showing any of the budgetary information or anything that would get, the organization in trouble. There's obviously some sensitive data that you want to protect, but you still want to radiate out, a certain amount of information so the teams know why they're working on certain features and, the impact this will have on the business in general. From someone in the portfolio layer that's on the, PPM team, you want to keep tabs on the tracking of the progress of the thing. And the Rational Team Concert SAFe add-on that we have will do just that. So the features that are all decomposed from this epic and the stories, and as things are completed, we'll see the trending graph through the progress bar here. And just to touch on that, so the epics should have child features, and all of those are listed throughout the application here. And adding in new ones is not a big deal. So now that we have a sense of what the epic looks like, and if we were to create a new one, we can get a sense of what kind of information are we trying to capture as far as the business case. And on this particular screen, by creating a new epic, you can see that our value statement is pre-populated from sort of the SAFe recommendation. This terminology can all be replaced on your company's preference or your client's needs and so on. But again, this is just a starting point, and again, it's all customizable. The idea is that it's very concise and it gets the point across quickly without a lot of like Ali was mentioning, the false detail. So we want to quickly summarize what's the purpose of this epic, like why are we doing it, who are we doing it for, what are some of the success criteria, what's sort of the parameters, right? So what's in scope, what's out of scope, and in general language, so that way you don't have to be a technical expert to understand this. Additional information, again, an epic should represent a lightweight business case. Additional information can be captured within the business case tab here. So these are more of those fine-grained details, who's responsible, who's going to be affected, what are we expecting to get out of it, with the type of return, what kind of analysis have we gone through, what kind of time frame are we looking at, what's the start and reasonable conclusion. But all this information can be captured, and it's not to like a detailed level to where you might have some of the more traditional projects starting up requiring very lengthy documents. We're trying to capture the information that's relevant, just in time, and provide a mechanism to update it as you go along. So that way, these fields can be populated at any time. As more information is learned, as more discovery happens, you might be able to fill in more of those details, but do it in a way that's more appropriate. And there's also an approval workflow. So if you do have business owners and they need to do some peer review or get some checkoffs, you can go through that mechanism as well. Okay. Cancel out of this. Okay. So now we have these epics that are housing all of our features. They're providing the guidance for the teams, and the way that we can access all this data through Rational Team Concert is mostly through plan views. So we've set up a couple different plans to help organize where data is coming from. And just as we mentioned, epics are usually categorized either by business or architectural value. So we have two views for those. We showed the business Kanban first. So just going over to the epic or the architecture Kanban. Again, the red coloring is showing up just as a cue that these particular epics are driving home architectural value. But also from that, if we go back and look at how some of the teams are leveraging the epics in their planning effort. So if we were to look at, you're going into your first PI and you have teams working on your epics, you can get to more of that completeness view, right? So if you're concerned with, are we on track to make this epic by the second quarter, do we need to make adjustments? How do we accommodate for different features being worked? Do we need to shift things around, reprioritize, and things like that? The features will help provide that data to drive the completeness of an epic. And all the team's data will be organized and displayed throughout here. But again, I just wanted to show this as a little bit more detail. And again, to drive home that when you're moving or you're maturing your Agile process, a lot of people think that this seems like a lot of overhead. But all the information that's put into the tool, can be leveraged. And there's a reason for doing it with the fixed metrics in mind. So the teams will get, a glimpse of the epics. They can use a Smart Hover feature to get that summary information. The value statement would be positioned here. So again, just to let people have the awareness of why this is important and what they're working towards, and it could be architectural runway or the business vision roadmap, kind of concepts. But drilling into the epic, we'll get a sense of which features are being worked on within this particular program increment. And again, going down even further, you can see the stories and getting much more detail. But again, the reason I show all this is that having that information available provides a lot more clarity, provides more detail and accurate results. So that way, this becomes a source of information that you don't have to constantly ask for status reports. Your metrics for the SAFe framework can be gleaned very easily from all the tool data. And there's a variety of ways to present that using the widgets or different organizational practices per team as they find their own preferred way to look at it. But again, the progress information is rolled up from all the features. If features are being worked on and completed, and tasks are being burned down, you'd see all that roll-up information at the epic level. And again, the progress bars will help indicate, yeah, we're trending in a good way, or if it starts turning red, might need to make some adjustments. But again, the idea is just to get the information out there in a clear manner. Okay, so I don't know if we have any questions so far. Do we? Not no. Okay.
I'm not seeing
All right,
anybody.
So that's a lot of what. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just verifying. Yeah, I didn't see any come through.
Okay. Yep. So that's a general layout of what the SAFe add-on offers. Again, just at the portfolio level, there's a lot more detail that you can look at our previous webinars to see the program and the team level and how the SAFe add-on provides value there. But again, all that information from those individuals working at the other levels, the other teams, it all rolls up into a nicer picture with the epics to categorize all of that. So another thing that I wanted to talk about is our bluejazz offering. So the SAFe add-on is a component that is part of our overall bluejazz picture. And the bluejazz platform itself provides the enablement to help the maturity process. Just as Ali mentioned, there's several different approaches. Some organizations are more primed to start with the portfolio management. Some need to start at the team level, and there's some combination thereof. But the important thing is that as change progresses throughout the organization, you need to have one source of information or one place for all that information. And the bluejazz platform helps organize all that and then lay it out in a clear, concise manner, but then also for consistency. So as change comes in through the organization, you want to have a stable point of view on it. Realizing that things are going to mature, so understanding might improve as time goes on. But one place for the information helps people to organize their thoughts, and that's the main purpose of our bluejazz platform here. So there's video components to this that will help articulate the process, and in this particular case, we're interested in learning more about the business epics and why this is of value. I'll play a quick little couple seconds of this process demonstration video, so hopefully this works out okay. Kanban system, so is designed in the match that comes out of the end of the Kanban. In this case, they're epics ready for implementation by hand. We want to make sure that we know. Okay. So again, different learning styles and different ways to gather that information and then process it. Some people prefer the visual cues. Other people are more prone or can read documents and get the information very quickly with high level of comprehension. But with bluejazz, we're trying to present the information in multiple ways, but the same information in the different formats. So again, you have a high level of accuracy and then better chance of successful adoption, no matter what the process is. We just happen to be highlighting SAFe in this case. Another component to bluejazz is what we call our guides. And this is what we think is a very powerful feature within our application, and something that probably haven't seen before. And the guides are going to help us actually run through the activity. So in this case, if we're looking to create a business epic, we can look at this activity and we'll launch our guide mechanism. So the guides will actually open up the live application that we were just in this particular case for our demo environment, and will provide steps and the textual information to progress through the guide steps. So why are we clicking on this thing, and what do we need to click on? So you can see here that there's a pointer that says, oh, we should click on this Dev Essentials link here. You'll notice that the guide is being updated. So the next step is automatically advanced to, and the pointer is updated to where we need to point to next. And continuing on with the steps, we'd figure out, okay, this is where we're going through the epic creation. And you can follow the steps all the way to completion to get a good sense of how do we create a business epic using this guide. But the important call out here is that this is the live environment that I was just demonstrating earlier without the assistance of the guide. So if I start navigating around through the application, there's no limits to what we just saw with the interaction. The guide is simply just additional information to help process the right steps. And again, this is to help with individuals that have different learning patterns. Some people can follow the steps in a very linear fashion. They don't want to deviate. Some people get into an area and they want to explore that a little bit more. And that's the capability and the flexibility of the guide. Some key concepts, again, the guides are written and can be designed by the client. So as you mature your process or the usage of the tool, different changes need to get radiated out. A guide will help you articulate that information to all of your team members, but get them to do it in your live environment. So if this was your production environment, you would have the guides running alongside that, but it'll be your team names, your epic names, the information that matters to you. So this is not a pre-canned virtual machine where it all works great in a lab environment, but then doesn't work in the real world. So this takes the guidance, the necessary information, so the process adherence, and shows you how to instrument it in your live environment. And we think this is a pretty cool thing. So just like to show this off a little bit. And going through the steps, if I happen to navigate away from what the guide is suggesting I do, I can always go back or move forward. So if I start exploring and I'm not on the same step that I should be anymore, I can always find my way back. So if I was on step 4 and the menu closed on me and I don't remember where I was, I can always go back and say, oh, okay, I need to go to this work items menu, and then it'll pick back up. So again, it provides a lot of flexibility, but a lot of power in that you're working in your live environment with the team structure, the nomenclature, the process maturity level that you're currently at to help advance and to help enable your own team members. Okay. All right. And as we are closing out on time, there's just one last thing I'd like to show. And this is a beta feature that we have, but if you're familiar with the IBM Watson concept, the computer program that has the cognitive searching capability and native language processing, we are fortunate to be participating in the beta program, and we have the capability to ask Watson SAFe questions. So in this particular case, this little icon for Einstein will trigger our capability into the Watson interface. And any type of question you can ask on your process will pull back information that's relevant to your environment as well. If I just happen to ask, what is PPM? Watson will come back with the information that we've provided and worked with the client on to get in, at their appropriate level, the information that matters, to them, so they get the right answer. And this is coming back with data that was, populated for our demo environment. But you can see here that there's rich content. It clearly articulates, okay, who's involved, some graphics, a link to the original source on the Scaled Agile website. And if we click on this, we can get a bigger sense of, other potential answers. And again, this is the demo environment, so Watson is doing its best to gather these different types of answers. And as the maturity process goes along, the confidence level would go up. So if I ask a different question here, like what is WSJF? We can get a response back here. It clearly articulates what weighted shoulders job first is, and you can see that we do have an 81% level of confidence. So again, just another cool feature we'd like to show as part of our bluejazz product to help enable and radiate out the new process change information. So it becomes an entire solution. It's not just process on its own. It's a complete picture. Get the tools to work with your process, and then help people use the tools to improve, their work capacity and maybe enjoy their jobs a little bit more. Okay. So if there aren't any questions, that kind of sums up what I have. Maybe we'll pause for a moment or so to see if any questions pop up. But yeah. Okay, well, I'm not seeing anything come in. But yeah, thank you for your time, and I hope you enjoyed the bluejazz aspect of this. And I'll turn it over to Ashley.
Thanks, Bobby, and thank you, Ali, and everyone that joined us. Certainly, everyone that joined us through the series, and anyone new that came on today. We thank you, and please contact us if you have any questions at all. It's info@blue-agility.com. So I don't have my slide up here. So thank you again. And when you leave here, survey will pop up. So please take the time to fill out that survey. We inspect and adapt, and we base our future webinars on the feedback that we receive. So thanks again, and we hope that you all have a great day.